Silence is usually a sign of defeat. In the high-stakes world of divorce court, where screaming matches and tearful outbursts are the currency of the desperate, silence is viewed as an admission of guilt. For 3 days, Layla Morgan sat in the defendant's chair in Superior Courtroom 402, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face an unreadable mask of porcelain calm. Her husband, the tech mogul Phineas Morgan, smirked from across the aisle, confident that his high-priced legal team had already won. He had taken her house, her reputation, and was moments away from taking her freedom. Everyone thought Layla was broken. Everyone thought she had given up. But they were wrong. Layla wasn't staying quiet because she was afraid. She was staying quiet because she was waiting for the trap to snap shut. And it all hinged on one question the judge was about to ask, a question that would shatter Phineas's life forever. The air in the courtroom was stale, recycled, and thick with the scent of expensive cologne and fear. Attorney Benedict, a man whose reputation for destroying ex-wives was as sharp as the crease in his Italian suit, paced in front of the witness stand. He looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. "Your Honor," Benedict boomed, turning to face Judge Halloway, an older man with bushy grey eyebrows and a face carved from granite. The defendant's refusal to speak, her refusal to deny these allegations, is frankly insulting to this court. We have presented evidence of her financial irresponsibility, her erratic behavior, and her infidelity. And what does she offer in her defense? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Benedict gestured dramatically toward Layla. She sat at the defense table, alone. She had fired her lawyer 2 days ago, a move that had caused a ripple of shock through the gallery. Now, she sat solitary in a simple navy dress, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She didn't look at Benedict. She didn't look at the gallery where the press was scribbling furiously. Her eyes were fixed on a point somewhere above the judge's head, as if she were watching a movie only she could see. Phineas Morgan leaned back in his leather chair, tapping a gold pen against his chin. He was handsome in that manufactured way billionaires often were. Teeth too white, tan too even, confidence bordering on sociopathy. He caught Layla's eye for a brief second and winked. It was a small, cruel gesture. "I won," the wink said. "You're nothing." "Mrs. Morgan," Judge Halloway said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the wood of the bench. "Do you have any cross-examination for the witness? Do you have anything to say to Mr. Benedict's opening statement regarding your alleged escapades in Paris?" The courtroom held its breath. The stenographer's fingers hovered over the keys. Layla slowly lowered her gaze. She looked at the judge, then at Phineas. She blinked once, slowly. Then she turned back to the judge and shook her head. "No, Your Honor," she said softly. Her voice was clear, melodic, but utterly devoid of emotion. "I have no questions." A murmur broke out in the back of the room. "She's crazy," someone whispered. "She's letting him take everything." Phineas chuckled, a low sound that carried in the quiet room. He leaned over to Benedict. "She's done. The prenup is ironclad, and with her acting like a mute, I'll get the art collection too." "Focus, Phineas," Benedict hissed, though he smiled. "We need to nail the mental incompetency plea to ensure she can't contest the business shares later." The case was supposed to be simple. Phineas Morgan, CEO of Morgan Data Systems, was divorcing his wife of 12 years. The narrative Benedict had spun was a classic. The small-town girl who couldn't handle the pressure of high society, who cracked under the weight of her husband's success, who sought comfort in the arms of a tennis instructor and spent millions on frivolous luxury. They had forged credit card statements. They had doctored photos. They had paid off a witness who claimed to be her lover. And through it all, Layla had sat there, silent. But there was something Benedict missed. He was so focused on the noise he was making, he didn't notice the papers Layla had in front of her. She wasn't taking notes on the trial. She was drawing, or so it seemed. If one looked closely, they would see she was sketching a timeline, a very specific, very dangerous timeline. "Call your next witness," Judge Holloway sighed, clearly bored by the lack of a fight. "The plaintiff calls Ms. Veronica Leclerc," Benedict announced. The doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The sound of high heels clicking on the linoleum floor was rhythmic, like a ticking clock. Veronica walked in. She was stunning, blonde, statuesque, wearing a red dress that was perhaps a shade too bright for a courtroom, but perfect for making an entrance. Layla's posture stiffened imperceptibly. This was it. The final dagger. Veronica was Phineas's personal assistant. She was also, as everyone in the inner circle knew, the woman Phineas intended to marry the moment the ink on the divorce papers was dry. But for the purpose of this trial, she was a concerned character witness. Veronica took the stand, swearing to tell the truth. She looked at Phineas with wide, fearful eyes, playing the part of the innocent bystander perfectly. "Ms. Leclerc," Benedict began, his voice softening to a purr. "Please tell the court about the incident on the night of November 14th. Veronica took a shaky breath. I went to the Morgan estate to drop off some contracts for Mr. Morgan. He wasn't home yet. Mrs. Morgan was there. She was in a rage." "A rage?" Benedict prompted. "Was she violent?" "Yes," Veronica lied, a tear slipping down her cheek. "She was throwing vases. She was screaming that she would burn the company to the ground. She said she knew secrets that would bury Phineas. She looked unhinged. I was terrified for my life." Phineas covered his face with his hand, shaking his head in mock sorrow. "And did she say anything specific about the company finances?" Benedict asked, leading the witness. "She said she didn't care about the law," Veronica sobbed. "She said she would lie to everyone to get half his money." It was a masterclass in manipulation. Benedict looked at the jury box, though there was no jury for this hearing, only the judge, making sure the point landed. "Your witness?" Benedict sneered at Layla. Layla stood up. For the first time in days, she actually stood up. She smoothed the wrinkles of her dress. She walked toward the witness stand. Veronica stopped crying instantly, her eyes narrowing as she watched the woman she had helped destroy approach. Layla stopped 3 feet from the witness box. She tilted her head. "Hello, Veronica," Layla said. "Hello, Layla," Veronica replied, her voice icy. Layla stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. "Mrs. Morgan?" Judge Holloway interjected. "Do you have a question?" Layla smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized the cage door was open. "No questions, Your Honor," Layla said, turning her back on Veronica. "I just wanted to see if she could look me in the eye." She returned to her seat. Phineas frowned. That was it? That was the defense? "This is a circus," Benedict muttered. "Your Honor, I move for an immediate judgment. The defendant is clearly not participating in her own defense. We have established cause, infidelity, and instability." "Not so fast," Judge Holloway said. He adjusted his glasses, looking down at Layla. "Mrs. Morgan, you realize that if you do not present a defense, I have no choice but to rule in favor of your husband based on the evidence presented." Layla looked up. "I understand, Your Honor. But I am not presenting a defense against the divorce. I want the divorce." "Then what are we doing here?" the judge asked, exasperated. "We are here," Layla said, her voice suddenly gaining a steel edge that echoed off the walls, "because I am waiting for Mr. Morgan to commit perjury regarding the Cayman assets, which he just did by submitting that financial affidavit this morning." Phineas froze. Benedict's head snapped up. "That affidavit is sealed," Benedict shouted. "It is not part of the public record." "It is now," Layla said, pulling a single piece of paper from her folder. "Because I'm not just the defendant, Your Honor. I'm the co-signer on the account he forgot he opened." To understand why that sentence froze the blood in Phineas Morgan's veins, one has to go back. Not to the courtroom, but to a small coffee shop in Seattle, 14 years ago. Layla wasn't born into money. She was Layla Hart then, a scholarship student studying forensic accounting. She met Phineas when he was nobody, just a charming guy in a wrinkled shirt with a laptop and a billion-dollar idea that no bank would fund. She fell for the ambition. She fell for the way his eyes lit up when he talked about algorithms. But more than that, Phineas needed her. He was the visionary, the face, the salesman. But he was terrible with numbers. He was messy with details. Layla was the cleaner. For the first 5 years of Morgan Data Systems, Layla wasn't just the wife. She was the CFO, though she never took a salary and never put her name on the official board. She liked the background. She liked the safety of the shadows. She structured his tax shelters. She organized the offshore holdings to protect their initial capital. She built the labyrinth that made Phineas look like a genius. When the company went public, Phineas became a god. And gods, Layla learned, eventually resent the priests who know their prayers are fake. The drift was slow. First it was late nights. Then the business trips to Tokyo and London without her. Then the comments about her appearance. "Maybe wear something brighter, Layla. You look like a librarian." She saw the change. She saw the way he looked at her, not with love, but with the wary calculation of a man looking at a liability. He knew that she knew where every dollar was buried. When Veronica entered the picture 2 years ago, Layla didn't scream. She didn't fight. She watched. She saw the texts. She tracked the hotel receipts that Phineas thought he was hiding on a corporate card. But the final straw wasn't the affair. It was the cancer scare. 6 months ago, Layla found a lump. It turned out to be benign, but for 3 weeks she lived in the shadow of death. She went to Phineas, needing comfort. He had sighed, checking his watch. "I have a board meeting, Layla. Can't you call your mother?" That night, she went into his home office. She wasn't looking for proof of cheating. She had plenty of that. She was looking for their estate planning, wondering what would happen if she actually died. She found a folder on his computer. It was encrypted, but Layla had set up his passwords. Inside was a file named Project Clean Slate. It wasn't a retirement plan. It was a liquidation strategy. Phineas was methodically moving assets out of their joint holdings into shell companies registered in names Layla didn't recognize. But worse, there were emails between Phineas and Benedict. "If she gets sick, it makes it easier. We can declare her incapacitated. Power of attorney transfers to you. We drain the trust before she even knows what hit her." He wasn't just leaving her. He was planning to leave her destitute and dying. Layla sat in that dark office, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears drying on her cheeks. The love she had for him didn't just die. It evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard vacuum. She didn't confront him. She didn't file for divorce immediately. She went back to bed. The next morning, she made him coffee. She kissed him on the cheek. And then she began to work. She knew Phineas's weakness, his arrogance. He thought she was just a housewife who used to be good at math. He forgot she was the one who built the castle he was living in. For 6 months, she played the part of the oblivious, depressed wife. She let him think she was losing her grip. She let him think she was weak. All the while she was gathering string. Back in the courtroom, the air was vibrating with tension. "The Cayman account?" Judge Holloway asked, looking over his spectacles at Benedict. "Mr. Benedict, your client stated under oath that all international assets were disclosed." "They were," Benedict sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. "My client has no Cayman holdings. This is a fabrication by a desperate woman." "Is it?" Layla asked. She didn't shout. She just held up the piece of paper. "This is a transaction log from Apex Holdings Limited, located in Georgetown. It shows a transfer of $45 million 3 days ago. The authorization signature is P. Morgan." Phineas stood up, knocking his chair over. "That's privileged corporate information. She hacked my files." The courtroom gasped. Layla smiled. "So you admit the account exists?" Phineas's mouth snapped shut. He realized his mistake instantly. His face went from tan to a sickly shade of grey. Judge Holloway slammed his gavel. "Order! Mr. Morgan, sit down. Mrs. Morgan, bring that document to the bench." Layla walked forward. Her heels clicked with authority now. She handed the paper to the judge. He studied it, his frown deepening. This is significant," the judge muttered. "If this assets list was withheld—" "It's not just withheld, Your Honor," Layla said. "It's stolen. That money was transferred from the employee pension fund of Morgan Data Systems." The press gallery erupted. Reporters were typing so fast it sounded like heavy rain. Pension fraud. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was federal prison time. "Liar!" Veronica shrieked from the witness stand. "He would never—" "Your Honor," Benedict shouted over the noise, "I object. This is ambush tactics. This document is not authenticated." "I can authenticate it," Layla said, calm as ever, "because I am the one who approved the initial setup of the shell company 10 years ago, under the explicit instruction that it was for R&D development. I didn't know until last week that Phineas had converted it into his personal piggy bank." She turned to Phineas. "I tried to protect you, Phineas. For years, I cleaned up your messes. But you got greedy. You didn't just want to leave me. You wanted to destroy me. You wanted to leave me with nothing." She took a step closer to him, ignoring the bailiff who started to move toward her. "You forgot one thing," she whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I'm the only one who knows the passwords." The courtroom was in chaos. Judge Holloway ordered a recess, banging his gavel until the wood threatened to splinter. 20 minutes, he roared. "Counsel, in my chambers, now." Phineas looked at Layla with pure hatred. If looks could kill, she would have disintegrated on the spot. He stormed out after Benedict, whispering furiously into his ear. Layla sat back down. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hand trembled slightly, the first sign of nerves she had shown. A young man in a cheap suit approached the railing. It was a junior reporter from a local paper. "Mrs. Morgan," he whispered. She looked at him. "Is it true?" he asked. "About the pension fund?" "Every penny," she said. The recess dragged on for an hour. When the judge returned, his face was thunderous. Phineas and Benedict followed, looking disheveled. Benedict's tie was loosened. Phineas's face was red. "Back on the record," Judge Holloway said. "In light of the new evidence presented by the defendant, the court is ordering an immediate freeze on all assets held by Mr. Morgan, both domestic and international." Benedict stood up, looking defeated. "Your Honor, we would like to request a continuance to gather documents to refute these claims." "Denied," Holloway snapped. "We are finishing this today." Mrs. Morgan, you may continue your defense. Layla stood. I have no further evidence regarding the finances at this moment, Your Honor. The FBI has already been sent the digital keys to the server. Phineas flinched as if he'd been slapped. However, Layla continued, I do have one more witness I would like to call. Someone Mr. Morgan didn't know I knew about. Phineas looked at Benedict. Who? His eyes asked. Who else is there? The defense calls Dr. Oris Thorne, Layla said. The blood drained from Veronica's face. Even Benedict looked confused. Who is Dr. Thorne? The judge asked. Dr. Thorne is a pediatric specialist, Layla said. From the St. Jude's Medical Center in Zurich. The doors opened. A tall, thin man with spectacles walked in. He looked uncomfortable, clutching a briefcase. Phineas sank into his chair. He put his head in his hands. Dr. Thorne took the stand. Dr. Thorne, Layla said, acting as her own lawyer. Do you recognize the man sitting at the plaintiff's table? Yes, the doctor said with a thick German accent. That is Mr. Morgan. He is the benefactor of the trust. And what is the purpose of that trust? Layla asked. It pays for the ongoing care of the patient, the doctor said. And who is the patient? The patient is Leo Leclerc, the doctor said. He is 5 years old. The courtroom went silent again. Leclerc, Veronica's last name. Layla turned to Veronica, who was still sitting in the front row, weeping silently. Veronica has a son, Layla told the court. A son with severe medical needs. A son that Phineas has been paying to keep hidden in a private facility in Switzerland for 5 years. She looked at Phineas. You didn't just cheat on me 2 years ago, Phineas. You've had a second family for 5 years. You have a son you abandoned to a clinic so he wouldn't ruin your image as the carefree bachelor CEO. He's sick, Phineas shouted, finally losing control. He needs the best care. I was protecting him. You were protecting your stock price, Layla shouted back, her voice finally breaking, the emotion pouring out. I would have loved him, Phineas, if you had told me, if you had just told me. I would have loved him like my own. We couldn't have children, you knew that. I would have taken him in. The raw pain in her voice silenced the room. This was the tragedy beneath the scandal. Layla wasn't just angry about the money. She was heartbroken by the betrayal of family. She had wanted to be a mother more than anything, and Phineas knew it. He had hidden a child from her, a child he was ashamed of. You left that little boy alone in a foreign country, Layla said, tears streaming down her face now. Just like you were planning to leave me. Judge Halloway looked sick. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Mr. Benedict, the judge said quietly, I suggest you advise your client to sit down and shut up before I have him held in contempt. Yes, Your Honor, Benedict squeaked. Mrs. Morgan, the judge said gently, this is a lot, but we need to address the matter of the divorce settlement. I don't want his money, Layla said, wiping her face. I don't want the company. It's built on fraud anyway. Then what do you want? I want custody, Layla said. Custody? The judge blinked. Custody of whom? Of Leo, Layla said, pointing to Veronica. She signed away her rights to Phineas 3 years ago in exchange for a monthly allowance. I found the documents. Phineas is the legal guardian, and he is unfit. As his legal wife, I am petitioning for emergency custody of the child he abandoned. Veronica stood up. You would do that? Someone has to be his mother, Layla said, since his father is going to prison and you sold him for a designer wardrobe. Veronica collapsed into her seat, sobbing uncontrollably. It seemed like the climax, the fraud revealed, the secret child exposed, the moral high ground claimed, but the story wasn't over. The judge looked at Layla. He studied her face. He saw the pain, but he also saw the calculation. He leaned forward. "Mrs. Morgan," Judge Holloway said, "you have presented a compelling case. You have exposed crimes. You have shown great compassion for a child not your own." "Thank you, Your Honor." "But," the judge paused. The air grew heavy. "There is one thing that bothers me." Layla froze. "You said you found the files regarding the pension fraud last week," the judge said. "And the files regarding the child 6 months ago." "Yes," Layla said, her voice cautious. "But this document," the judge held up the bank transfer from the Cayman Islands. "The timestamp on the metadata, I'm looking at the digital footprint here. Yes?" "The transfer was authorized by P. Morgan," the judge said. "But the IP address where the transfer originated, it matches the IP address of your personal laptop, Mrs. Morgan. Not your husband's office. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of a predator realizing another predator was in the room. The judge narrowed his eyes. "So, I have one unexpected question for you, Mrs. Morgan." Layla held her breath. "Did you discover the fraud?" the judge asked softly. "Or did you execute it?" The courtroom was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Judge Holloway's question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Did you discover the fraud, or did you execute it?" Phineas Morgan, who had been moments away from a total meltdown, suddenly straightened in his chair. A spark of hope ignited in his eyes. He pointed a trembling finger at Layla. "She did it!" Phineas shouted, his voice cracking with hysterical relief. "I told you, she's the accountant. She knows the codes. She set me up. She transferred the money from my company to frame me because I was leaving her. Arrest her!" Benedict, sensing a miraculous resurrection of his case, jumped in. "Your Honor, this is the smoking gun. The IP address matches the defendant's laptop. The transfer happened while my client was at a charity gala. We have timestamps and photos of him there. He couldn't have been at her house using her computer. Layla Morgan embezzled those funds to destroy my client's reputation and secure a payout," the press gallery murmured. The narrative was shifting again. Was Layla the villain, after all? Was the silence, the porcelain mask, just the face of a sociopath? Layla didn't flinch. She didn't look at Phineas. She kept her eyes locked on Judge Holloway. She reached into her leather tote bag and pulled out a small, black USB drive. "You are right, Your Honor," Layla said, her voice steady. "The transfer originated from my laptop. My personal MacBook, which sits on the desk in the guest bedroom of the house, I, until recently, shared with my husband." "So you admit it?" the judge asked, his brow furrowed. "I admit that the data packets left my machine," Layla said, "but I did not press the enter key." "This is ridiculous semantics," Benedict scoffed. "If it's your computer, it's your crime." "Not if the computer was hijacked," Layla said. She turned to the bailiff. "May I connect this drive to the court display system? It contains a screen recording taken on the night in question." Judge Holloway nodded slowly. "Proceed." Layla plugged the drive in. The large monitors on the courtroom walls flickered to life. The screen showed the desktop of a laptop. The clock in the corner of the screen read 11:42 p.m., November 11th. "At this time," Layla narrated, "I was asleep. I had taken a sleeping pill. As verified by my medical records and the toxicity report I voluntarily submitted to the court clerk this morning. I was unconscious. On the screen, the mouse cursor began to move. But my computer was awake," Layla said, "because 3 months ago, Phineas installed a piece of software called shadow log on my device. It's a remote access Trojan, or ORAT. He told me he was installing antivirus software. In reality, he wanted to read my emails, check my search history, and spy on me to see if I was talking to divorce lawyers. Phineas's face went white. He didn't know, Layla continued, that I recognized the kernel driver he installed. I didn't delete it. Instead, I installed a background recorder. I wanted to see what he would do with that access. On the screen, the invisible user opened a browser. They navigated to the Cayman Islands bank portal. They entered a username, P.Morgan or admin. They entered a password. As you can see, Layla said, pointing to the screen, the user is typing quickly, but look at the bottom right of the screen. A notification pops up. On the video, a small iMessage bubble appeared in the corner of the desktop. It read, "Done with the gala. Boring. Heading to Veronica's." P. The courtroom gasped. That message, Layla said, was sent from Phineas's phone to his own iPad, which was synced to my laptop. He was controlling my computer remotely from his phone or tablet while leaving the gala. He thought he was being clever. He thought if he routed the theft through my IP address, the FBI would come for me, not him. He was framing me for the crime he was committing to pay for his new life with his mistress. The video continued. The user confirmed the transfer of $45 million. Then, the user opened a text file on Layla's desktop, typed, "I'm sorry, Phineas. I can't live without you," and saved it as suicide note draft.txt. He wasn't just framing me for theft, Layla said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more power than a scream. He was planting a suicide note. He was hoping the pressure would break me. He was hoping I would take my own life, and the police would find this note and the missing money and close the case. He wanted me dead, Your Honor. Silence. Absolute, horrified silence. Phineas Morgan sat frozen. The depth of his malice was laid bare. It wasn't just greed. It was a calculated attempt to induce self-destruction in the woman who had built his empire. Judge Holloway looked at the screen, then at Phineas. The look of disgust on the judge's face was profound. "Mr. Benedict," the judge said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I assume you were not aware of this?" Benedict was already packing his briefcase. He stood up, distancing himself physically from Phineas. "Your Honor, I must request to withdraw as counsel immediately. I cannot represent a client who uses my services to facilitate this." "Granted," the judge snapped. He turned to the bailiff. "Take Mr. Morgan into custody immediately. No bail. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for charges of grand larceny, wire fraud, perjury, and, frankly, I hope they find a charge for attempted psychological homicide." "No!" Phineas screamed as the bailiff grabbed his arms. "It was a setup. She knew. She watched me do it. Why didn't she stop me? She's an accessory." Layla watched him struggle. "I didn't stop you, Phineas, because you needed to show the world who you really are. I couldn't just divorce you. I had to exorcise you." As they dragged him out, kicking and screaming like a child, Layla felt no joy, just a heavy, exhausting relief. The monster was in a cage, but there was still one loose thread. She turned her eyes to the back of the courtroom. Veronica was trying to sneak out the side door. "Not yet," Layla whispered to herself. The hallway outside the courtroom was a frenzy of flashbulbs and reporters. Layla ignored them, flanked by court security as she moved toward the private conference rooms. She asked the bailiff to bring Veronica Leclerc to her. 5 minutes later, Veronica was shoved into the small, beige room. Her mascara was running, her designer dress looked rumpled, and her arrogance had completely evaporated. She looked at Layla with the eyes of a trapped Animal. "What do you want?" Veronica hissed, trying to muster some bravado. "He's gone. You won. You get the money. Just let me leave." Layla sat at the table, her hands folded. "Sit down, Veronica." "I don't have to listen to you." "You do," Layla said calmly. "Unless you want me to hand this folder to the Swiss authorities." Veronica froze. She slowly pulled out a chair and sat. "What folder?" Layla slid a manila envelope across the table. "Dr. Thorne is a very thorough man. But he is also a man of conscience. When I contacted him last month, he was hesitant to speak. But when I showed him the evidence that you hadn't visited Leo in 2 years, he became very cooperative." Veronica flinched. "I was busy. Phineas kept me busy." "Phineas isn't here to blame anymore," Layla said. "This folder contains the financial records of the trust fund Phineas set up for Leo's care. It was a generous fund, $10,000 a month for medical expenses." So, Layla leaned forward. "The clinic only cost $6,000 a month. The remaining $4,000 was supposed to go into a savings account for Leo's future. Instead, it went into an account under the name VL Consulting. You've been skimming from your own sick child's trust fund, Veronica. For shoes? For handbags?" Veronica's face crumpled. "You don't understand. Phineas didn't give me any cash. I had to look the part. I had to keep up appearances to keep him interested. I did it for us. For Leo. Stealing from a disabled child is not doing it for him," Layla said coldly. "That is embezzlement. And in Switzerland, they take banking fraud very seriously." Veronica began to cry, ugly, heaving sobs. "Please, please don't send me to jail. I'll go away. I'll never come back." Layla watched her. She felt a flicker of pity, but she crushed it. This woman had helped plan her destruction. "I have a deal for you," Layla said. Veronica looked up, hope warring with fear. "Anything." "You are going to sign a document today," Layla said. "It is a voluntary termination of parental rights. You are going to grant me full, uncontested guardianship of Leo. You will state that you are unfit and unable to care for him." "But he's my son," Veronica whispered weakly. "He's a son you haven't seen in 700 days, Layla countered. "He's a son you stole from. He's a son you hid. If you sign, I burn this evidence. I won't press charges for the embezzlement. You walk away free. You can find another billionaire to leech off of. But you never, ever contact Leo again." Veronica looked at the folder. Then she looked at the door. The choice was between her freedom and a child she viewed as a burden. It wasn't a hard choice for her, and that was the tragedy of it. "Where do I sign?" Veronica asked. Layla produced the papers and a pen. Her hand didn't shake as she watched the biological mother sign away her child. It was a transaction, cold and final. When Veronica left the room, she didn't look back. She ran toward the elevator, fleeing the wreckage of her life. Layla sat alone in the room for a long time. She looked at the signature. She thought of the little boy in Zurich, a boy she had only seen in photos Dr. Thorne had sent. A boy with big, sad eyes and a breathing tube. "I'm coming, Leo," she whispered. "I'm coming." 3 months had passed since the gavel fell, but inside the state penitentiary, time seemed to stand still. The visiting room was a stark, soul-crushing environment, a brutal contrast to the mahogany-paneled boardrooms and velvet-roped country clubs Phineas Morgan had occupied for his entire adult life. The air here was recycled and cold, smelling faintly of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with an incessant, migraine-inducing hum, casting a sickly pallor over everything. Phineas sat on a bolted-down metal stool behind a sheet of thick, scratched plexiglass. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. The arrogant, sun-kissed billionaire was gone. In his place sat a prisoner in a faded orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His tan had faded to a sickly grey, his hair was thinning and unkempt, and his eyes, once sharp with predatory intelligence, darted around with the nervous energy of a trapped animal. He was a king without a kingdom, stripped of the only thing that had ever given him value: his money. When the heavy steel door on the visitor's side buzzed open, Layla walked in. Phineas blinked, as if looking directly into the sun. Layla looked radiant. She wasn't wearing the severe, armored designer suits she used to wear to his corporate dinners. She wore a simple white blouse and a pair of jeans, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked 10 years younger, lighter, as if a great physical weight had been lifted from her spine. She didn't look like a woman visiting her ex-husband in prison. She looked like a woman who had just taken a deep breath of fresh air for the first time in a decade. She sat down opposite him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, they both reached for the black plastic phones mounted on the wall. "You look happy," Phineas spat into the receiver, his voice tinny and distorted. He had intended it to sound biting, but it came out sounding merely pathetic. "I am," Layla replied, her voice calm and clear. "You must be," Phineas sneered, his hands gripping the receiver so tight his knuckles turned white. "Enjoying the spoils of war? How does the champagne taste when it's bought with my money? Have you bought a yacht yet? A villa in Tuscany?" Layla watched him with a gaze that was disturbingly placid. "I don't have the money, Phineas." Phineas froze. "What?" "I donated it," Layla said simply. "All of it. The liquidated assets, the house, the cars, the art collection. I gave 50% to St. Jude's Research Hospital in Leo's name, and the other 50% to the National Foster Care Network. I kept nothing." Phineas stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. His brain, wired for greed and accumulation, couldn't process the sentence. You burned it? You burned my empire to the ground for charity?" "It was never your empire, Phineas. It was ours, and it was rotten at the foundation," Layla said, leaning in slightly. "I didn't want a cent of it. It was dirty money, earned by neglecting your family and defrauding your employees. I washed it clean the only way I knew how." "Then why are you here?" Phineas demanded, his voice rising. "If you didn't come to gloat about the cash, why come at all? To laugh at me?" "No," Layla said. "I came because you asked a question in the courtroom, right before they dragged you away. You asked why I didn't stop you. You shouted that I watched you do it." "You set me up," Phineas hissed, the memory of his trial burning in his eyes. "You manipulated the software. You trapped me." "I did much more than manipulate software, Phineas," Layla said softly. She looked him dead in the eye, her expression unreadable. "Do you remember the failed merger with DataCorp last year?" she asked. "The deal that was supposed to be your golden parachute? The one that fell through at the 11th hour, putting the company in debt and making you desperate for liquid cash?" "Yeah," Phineas muttered. "The due diligence team found a discrepancy. Bad luck." "It wasn't bad luck," Layla corrected him. "It was me. I found a minor discrepancy in DataCorp's valuation models 3 weeks before the deal closed. I could have fixed it. I could have smoothed the numbers, made the equation work. That was my job, remember? To clean up the mess. But I didn't. Instead, I sent an anonymous tip to their audit team, highlighting the error. I killed the deal, Phineas." Phineas's eyes widened. He leaned closer to the glass. "And the line of credit from the bank? Layla continued, her voice steady and rhythmic. The one you applied for when the merger failed? The loan that was denied, which forced you to look at the pension fund as your only option? The bank said I was over-leveraged, Phineas whispered. I didn't block the loan, Layla said. But I did access the application file you sent them. I changed the risk assessment parameters. Just a decimal point shifted to the right, enough to flag you as high risk in their algorithm. I closed the door on the bank, Phineas. You, Phineas breathed, the realization crashing over him like a wave. You cut off my money. You systematically cut off every legal way I had to survive. I created a maze, Layla said, her voice devoid of apology. I knew you, Phineas, better than anyone. I knew that if you were backed into a corner, if you felt your lifestyle and your ego were threatened, you wouldn't do the honorable thing. You wouldn't downsize. You wouldn't be humble. You would steal. She paused, letting the words sink in. I didn't make you a criminal, she said. You were already a criminal in your heart. You were already stealing from your disabled son. You were already planning to defraud me. I just removed the legal options and left the illegal door wide open. I waited for you to walk through it. Phineas slammed his fist against the plexiglass. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small room. A guard in the corner took a step forward, hand on his baton. You're a witch, Phineas screamed, his face contorted with impotent rage. You twisted everything. You're evil. No, Layla said, standing up slowly. She looked down at him, not with hatred, but with a profound sense of finality. I'm an accountant. I balanced the books. You took a life from me. The 12 years I wasted building your lie. So I took the rest of yours. She hung the phone back on the cradle. The click was final. Phineas was screaming into the dead receiver, mouthing curses behind the glass, banging on the barrier that separated his world from hers. Layla didn't flinch. She turned and walked toward the heavy steel door. She didn't look back. As the door clanged shut behind her, sealing the tomb she had built for him, Layla stepped out into the sunlight, leaving the architect of her misery trapped in the cage of his own greed. The air here didn't smell like recycled office oxygen, anxiety, or the cloying, expensive perfume of social climbers. It smelled of brine, wet stone, and the deep, resinous scent of Douglas firs. It was a raw, untamed smell, and to Layla it was the finest perfume in the world. Her house was small, a weathered cedar cottage perched precariously on a bluff overlooking the churning grey waters of the Oregon coast. It was a far cry from the sprawling, manicured estate in Connecticut, with its heated floors and silent servants. Here, the floorboards creaked with personality, and the wind rattled the window panes like an old friend demanding entry. Layla sat on the back porch, a heavy wool blanket wrapped tight around her legs against the evening chill. She held a mug of tea, watching the sunset bleed spectacular shades of bruised purple and burning gold into the horizon. She wasn't Layla Morgan, the shadow CFO, anymore. To the locals in this sleepy, mist-shrouded town, she was just Layla, the quiet woman who ran the morning shift at the bakery near the harbor. She woke at 4 a.m. every day, not to check Asian market futures or wire transfer logs, but to plunge her hands into flour and yeast. There was something profoundly healing about kneading dough. It was physical, tactile work. You couldn't manipulate bread with a spreadsheet. You had to feel it, nurture it, and wait for it to rise. It was honest work, something she hadn't done in 15 years. The rusted hinges of the screen door behind her groaned, breaking her reverie. "Mama?" The voice was small, hesitant, but it no longer held the tremor of perpetual fear. Layla turned, her expression softening instantly. Leo stood in the doorway, framed by the warm yellow light of the kitchen. He was wearing his favorite dinosaur pajamas, the ones he insisted on wearing even before the sun went down. He looked healthier now. The hollows in his cheeks had filled out, and his skin, once pasty from years spent inside a sterile Swiss clinic, was now dusted with freckles. "Hey, buddy," Layla said, opening her arms. "Come here. You should be in bed. But I think the sunset is putting on a show just for you." Leo shuffled forward and climbed into her lap. He still moved with a slight stiffness, a lingering reminder of the muscle atrophy from his illness, but he was getting stronger every day. He smelled of lavender soap and crayons. "I drew a boat," Leo whispered, pressing a crumpled piece of construction paper into her hand. Layla held it up to the fading light. It was a chaotic swirl of blue and black crayon with a brown shape floating in the middle. "It's a beautiful boat, Leo. Is it the one we're taking tomorrow?" "Yeah," he nodded against her chest. "For the whales. Do you think they'll like me?" "I think," Layla said, kissing the top of his head, "that the whales will love you almost as much as I do. And that's a lot." It hadn't been an easy transition. The happily ever after hadn't started the moment the gavel fell. The first few months had been a blur of doctors, physical therapists, and night terrors. Leo had been confused, angry, and grieving a mother who had abandoned him and a father he barely knew. There were nights when he screamed until his throat was raw, and Layla would sit on the floor by his bed, rocking him, singing songs she had to look up on the internet, because she'd never had a child to sing to before. She had learned to be a mother in the trenches. But slowly, with the patience of the tides below them, the trust had built. Layla shifted the blanket to cover him better. She reached into the pocket of her oversized cardigan and pulled out a small, worn leather notebook. It was the only artifact she had kept from her old life. She opened it to the very last page. It was a simple list, written in her precise accountant's script. Phineas, Veronica, Benedict. The first two names were already crossed out with thick, heavy lines. Phineas was serving 12 years in federal prison. He wouldn't see freedom until Leo was a grown man. Veronica had vanished into obscurity, likely finding another host to latch on to, but she was legally erased from their lives. Layla uncapped a black pen. She looked at the third name. News had travelled slowly to the coast, but it had arrived this morning in a clipped email from a former colleague. Attorney Benedict had been disbarred following an investigation into his unethical collusion with Phineas. His firm had dissolved. His reputation was ash. With a steady hand, Layla drew a firm, single line through the name Benedict. The list was complete. The ledger was balanced. She closed the book and set it on the table. She looked out at the ocean, the vast, uncontrollable, beautiful ocean. She had spent her entire adult life trying to control outcomes, managing risk, predicting the unpredictable. But this warm weight of a little boy in her arms, the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the rocks, the simple anticipation of baking bread in the morning, this was something she couldn't calculate. It was grace. Leo shifted, looking up at her with wide, sleepy eyes. "Mama." "Yes, Leo." "Are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. She looked at the boy who had been a secret, a pawn, a hidden line item in a fraudulent budget. Now, he was her son. Layla smiled, and it wasn't the practiced porcelain smile of a CEO's wife. It was genuine, warm, and it reached all the way to her eyes, crinkling the corners. "Yes," she whispered into the salt air. "I finally got the numbers right." She held him tight as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, ending the long night of her past and promising a bright, clean morning. The silence that surrounded them now wasn't a weapon, and it wasn't a trap. It was peace. Layla Morgan proved that the loudest person in the room isn't always the winner. Sometimes, the most dangerous person is the one who sits quietly, waits, and lets the enemy destroy themselves. She turned her pain into a plan and her betrayal into a new beginning. It's a powerful reminder that while we can't control how people treat us, we can control how we react. And sometimes, the best reaction is a well-timed trap. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a good revenge story, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. What would you have done in Layla's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.